don't want to cram 2 modules for a day. So we're going to do it in 11 Saturdays. So that will mean take us to 2 months and 3 weeks. Hopefully it will get to that. Hopefully we'll find some that we can jam together. But what we're trying to do is to give people enough time to assimilate this thing. It's not what you get in one go. So you sit down, you listen, you understand, if you have questions, you ask. And I don't know whether Dominic received any questions, but I didn't receive any questions during the week. But in case you have some things you still don't understand from the 8900, you can always ask. The aim is to take it slow and steady, and at the end of each whole thing, you should be comfortable enough to go for the AZ 900 certification, which is done, and the AZ 104 certification. So today we are starting with the first module there, which is basically administer identity, we're basically going to focus on identity in Azure. So we're going to talk about Entra, what's Entra, what is an Entra all about, all those things. That's what we're going to fully focus on today. All right, so starting, administer identity, what it's all about. So we're going to look at understand Microsoft Entra ID, going to see how to create, configure, and manage identities. The lab 01 is going to be manage Microsoft Entra identities, right? Entra ID identities. But I wanted to ask a question. How many of us were able to get the what do they call it? How many of us were able to get the subscription? Did anybody get the subscription with their credit card? Did anybody try? Can anybody hear me? It looks like I'm talking to myself.
Yes.
Okay. Did anybody try to get the free Azure subscription, right? The free Azure subscription, the 200 free. I shared the link last week. I don't know whether did anybody try that. Did anybody run into issues with that?
No issues from my end, though. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'll just kickstart. Okay. Understand. So the objectives of the class is going to be quite simple. It's understand Microsoft ID, Entra ID. Oh, thank you, John. That's very good. That means you can actually go ahead and do the lab. Maybe during the lab session, I will let you share your screen. So we'll just walk through it. That'll be great. All right. We're going to create and configure and manage identities. We're going to do lab 01, manage Microsoft Entra identities. Right. So kickstarting this. Objectives again, just to mention it. Okay, so what this slide is basically showing us, just showing us how this ties into your AZ 104, right? The certification. We're basically saying that 20 to 25 questions from here is going to come from identities, right? Understanding this. So this is very important. I always have this thing. I always say that identity is actually very important. So am I saying this because I was SME subject matter identity for a little over 5 years when I was serving with Tech Expert, which is basically a sister company to Microsoft in Nigeria. So, and being there, I'll understand identity is very, very important to understanding Azure, understanding how it all links up, because everything you are going to do in Azure probably links to a service principal, which is an app registration, which relies on identity. So understanding which one basically works. And I can tell you on my day-to-day tasks, right now working as a platform engineer in the Netherlands, I've seen things around identity that people don't understand. So I remember someone reached out to me and my colleagues, they say, this is not working. I was like, which error are you getting? He said ADSTS. I was like, oh, not authentication error. Like, how do I know? It's because it's linked to identity, right? ADSTS, once the STS is authentication error. But leaving all that, let's look at what you're going to do today. So we're going to examine Microsoft Entra ID. We're going to describe Microsoft Entra ID concepts. We're going to compare Microsoft Entra ID to Active Directory domain services. So we're going to compare Microsoft Entra ID P1 and P2 plans. These are actually the paid plans, right? And we're going to try to see that can implement a self-service password reset. I'm going to explain what it is. I'll just kickstart this. What is Microsoft Entra ID? So think of it like this now. Most of us have Gmail, or most of us have Gmail, right? So when you sign in with your Gmail now, let me use, for example, Gmail, for example. When you sign into your Gmail and you try to open, let me use, for example, Google Docs, what happens is you use the same identity, the same email address, basically signs automatically, right? SSO, right? Single sign-on. They call it SSO, single sign-on. sometimes what happens is it gives you straight up access. Gives you access, right? You because of what? You are the same identity you used to have with your Gmail. That's what you used to sign into Google Docs. But it wasn't like that before. Far way back then. What happens? Like far away, because in early 2000, everything has their own username and password, right? They all have their own username and password, and not like single sign-on. That means you can have for example now, you can have an application, for example, let me use Gmail now. That means you sign in with your Gmail, you're now signing in with a different password, different account. You have to have a different password for this. So people have multiple passwords. But with the idea of this, with the idea of single sign-on, basically you can use one identity to sign on to several applications. Pushing forward to this, what is Microsoft Entra ID? Microsoft Entra ID is just basically Microsoft identity platform. That's how when it's called identity is basically who are you? What are you going to try to do, right? That's what Microsoft Entra ID is actually their own identity platform. It has 99.9999 SLA, so that means Microsoft saying that this is overly available. So if you have Office 365, if you check your email, most times when you check your email, I believe most of when you try to sign email your office, you always see something like, say, hey, enter username and password. And what do you see? Your office email, you have one single login.microsoft.com. That's basically the same thing. So all of them are being managed by Microsoft identity. To put that deep more into that, you can create application. So for example, now, let me use John, for example. John creates application. John has his own company called John Corporations, right? John decides to build an application for people to, let me use, for example, for people to apply for leave in his organization. So for those people to apply for leave, and John already has users, his team members, right? His team members, his workers, right? His staff probably needs to assign in. So John can register that application that somebody built to his Entra ID. If he registers that, they will use the same email address and same password they used to sign in to their phone, to their email. They'll use it to access that application. So that's what that part of the register configure access to applications, including single sign-on. That's what it is. With Entra ID, you can manage and provision users and groups. What is the users and groups? I'll show you an example. For example, now, as we are here now, I think we're about, if I calculate it now, I think we're about 12 in this class, right? Roughly 12 in this class. This is the people that attend the AZ 104 class. I can decide to create a group now, right, and add each user. So if I create a user named Nonso Dechuku, that's if I create Nonso Dechuku at AZ 104 class, that's a single user. If I decide to create an account for each and everybody, right, then the user account, I cannot add it to a group. That means a group, all of us are part of a group. That's what a group is. So you can also use Entra ID to manage federations, right? Manage federations. What does that mean? Basically means, okay, hey, I already have users on premise. I have users on premise. When I say users on premise, I was using Azure AD before. Not Azure AD. I was using Microsoft AD before, Active Directory before. So on my on-premise. So I already have users created there. So what I want the ability to be able to make the users I have on-premise, I want to use them in Azure. What do? I can configure federation. I can use what we call Entra ID Connect to sync those identities from on-premise to the cloud. That's also 100% possible. You can implement features like multi-factor authentication, 2FA, and conditional access. All falls under what they call under AD. I'm going to explain all of that bit by bit now. So key things to know: what is an identity? All right, I know I explained this a little bit. Identity is basically an object that can be authenticated. So for example, now nonso.udechukwu at az104class.com is an identity. So for example, now if I can sign in with that thing, it's an identity. It's an identity. The next thing, what is an account? What is an account? Account is the data associated with an identity. So for example, now nonso.udechukwu at az104.com, the account associated with say, Nonso Dechuku is a global administrator. Nonso Dechuku has access to do A, B, and C. That's an account is associated to an identity that is basically that's basically the data that's associated to that account, to that identity. So the next thing is a Microsoft Entra ID account. What is a Microsoft Entra ID? So these two might not be Microsoft. For example, your Gmail account. If a helene.ezadi@gmail.com is actually an identity, all right? So the fact that he has a Gmail account, right, as a Gmail account is basically the data that's assigned to it. What makes it an account because of the emails, the things associated to it that makes it an account, right? If I move a bit further and say, okay, for example, now Microsoft Entra ID account is basically saying, hey, this account is created in Microsoft Entra ID, right? For example, now, I can show you my environment.
So just a quick one here, a quick recap here. So guys, what he's trying to say is Microsoft Entra ID is like it's the new name for Microsoft Azure Active Directory. It's a cloud-based identity, which means it is a digital, like it has like a digital gatekeeper for your organization. It helps you to sign. It helps you to sign securely, user securely. It controls access. It protects identities, that is users. It enables single sign-on, which is an SSO. So in other words, why Microsoft Entra ID is important is because it keeps your data safe. It makes life easier for employee. No need to remember password. Even though you forget the password, you can use your Microsoft Entra ID and you sign in and then you get access to your whatever resources you want to use. It support compliance and standard. So remember this when they say Microsoft Entra ID, it is a digital what? A digital ID. It's a Microsoft ID for it, it's like a digital gatekeeper for your organization. So it's like when they talk about Entra ID, they're talking about your pass to have access to resources for that organization. So it's a digital gatekeeper for your organization. Like I said, what it does is it helps you secure, it helps you sign in securely. It controls access and it protects identities. That is you and I. The people who sign into those resources. So you can create creating like two multi-factor authenticator. It enables SSO, that is single sign-on. One login works for multiple applications. You can use one login, just one login. You can log into Teams and log into OneNote. You can log into so many applications. One login, that's SSO. You can use that to log into so many applications, right? Why is it important? It is important because it keeps your data safe. It makes life easier for employees. No need to remember password. No need to remember password. Did you see what that means? So it support compliance and security standard. So remember that Microsoft Entra ID is a digital what? Gatekeeper. Thank you so much.
All right. So back to what I was explaining. So I was explaining how Entra ID account. So for example, now this is an example of my Entra ID. All right. And these are, if I go there, these are different users. So it means that either there's actually admin, all these guys are basically identities, right? They're all accounts, identities inside my Entra ID. That's just the best way to summarize this. They're all identities inside my Entra ID. So they are all Entra IDs accounts. You can also see for the names I gave some of them. Some of them I gave service of ADFS, some you see some most of them are Entra ID accounts inside my Entra ID. Moving forward, talent or direction. I explained this when we did this in Young, but I'm going to explain it again for people that might have forgotten. A tenant, anything, any resource you're going to create in Microsoft, any resource you're going to consume, any Microsoft service you're going to consume, you will need to what we call an Entra ID tenant. You need a tenant. So, for example, now for you to use Teams, for you to use SharePoint, there's also called a tenant. A tenant will be there somewhere because they have to. The authentication happens with the tenant. That's basically it, right? So, a tenant is basically to read out data. It's automatically created when your organization signs up for a Microsoft Cloud Service subscription. That's what I said. So, anytime you sign up to a Microsoft Service subscription, you basically get a tenant. So, for example, whether it's a Teams, whether it's Outlook, whether it's Office 365, you actually get a tenant. A tenant is what handles your identity, because when you create a tenant, your identity, your Entra ID is tied to that tenant. So, for example, if you look at my own scenario, you can see that I have a tenant now. my tenant name is called newsys, right? And this is my tenant ID. This is the tenant domain name, and this is basically the license. I'm going to explain more about license before. I can also create one other tenant. So, for example, if you look at now, I have other multiple tenants. You can see new train, because this is basically the one I use for training. If I switch to this is basically another tenant altogether. I can create accounts for Adela, for John, all in this tenant, right? All in this tenant. Moving forward, the next thing is because subscription. Basically said, that's why my question earlier today was that, hey, how many of us were able to get the free subscription? Without a subscription, you cannot create an Azure resource. You cannot create any resource. That's basically how Microsoft basically bills you. That's how they charge you. So the free subscription gives you what, like $200. Without a subscription, you are not able to create any Azure resource. So if I take that into this now, for example, now I can say, okay, this is a subscription. And this is in this tenant, right? This tenant's called new train. Let me go back to, let me go to Entra, for example. Entra ID. So this is new train 60. New train 60 might have some users. Let me be sure. I just don't have only one user, which is me. If I go to subscription, there is no subscription here. What does that mean? It means that no, so cannot create any resource. For example, if I try to create, for example, create a virtual machine. What do you see? Let me see. It's telling me I need to start a free trial if I can create a resource. Because of what? I don't have a subscription. Remember, you can have a free tenant, but without a subscription, you cannot create any resource. So does anybody have any question? Okay. All right. Moving forward. Right. The next thing is you ask me also which one is Active Directory Domain Services, which one is Entra ID. You're confusing me. Don't be confused, right? Compare Microsoft Entra ID to Active Directory Domain Services. This I've seen have messed up some people, right? So, for example, how does it mess up some people? Because these guys are two different technologies, right? The best way I'll explain it, I say, okay, hey, how many of us have driven manual cars and how many of us have driven automatic cars, right? Automatic car, you put your gear, you just drive wherever you go. Manual cars, you start from you start with neutral, you fill your car, you start with gear one, as your car's your engine side, your revving car, the engine side is revving side, you basically check your other car. That's basically one of the difference between the two. And two of them serve different purposes. First, one thing to know, right? Entra ID, that is Microsoft Entra ID, is the primary identity solution in Azure. So you have VMs, you have virtual machines, you are Kubernetes clusters, all those things authenticate to what? Microsoft Entra ID. That's the default one. So, but over time, before Microsoft Entra ID, how are people authenticating before? How do they connect? There's what we call Active Directory. So Active Directory is what? Active Directory Domain Services. So what is that? So that one is the, I used to say, is the old authentication protocols. It's the old way of authenticating. It uses what we call old authentication protocols, things like Kerberos, things like NTLM. So for example, now I can give you far back then, 2014, 2015. I was in a team that basically manages Active Directory Domain Services in the bank, for example. Now, what happened then? If somebody comes to the bank now, say, hey, I want to build an application. Let's say we want to build an application for cash, for check, for example, or check. We want a solution whereby check people, automated check system. John builds this application. John builds it finish. What John needs to do, he needs to send an email for some people to give him Kerberos login, the NTLM login, so that people will be able to authenticate the application. What does that do for you? What does it actually mean in essence? It actually means that NTLM, right? Sorry, Active Directory is the first way of authentication. There's a key difference between those two. The key difference is one, think about modern authentication protocols and old authentication protocols. For example, now, Microsoft Entra ID uses the modern authentication protocols, whereas Active Directory Domain Services uses the old authentication protocol, which is Kerberos, NTLM. Microsoft Entra ID uses modern authentication protocols, things like SAML, things like WS Federation, things like OID Connect, OpenID Connect, things like OAuth. All those things are actually the protocols that are being used. things to note. Another thing to note, if it's Entra ID can be queried over HTTP and HTTPS. What I talk about, that means you can write your script, you can write a query, and you can query it via API, which are Postman, right? You can do get, you can do puts, you can query it via over API. For Microsoft Entra, Active Directory Domain Services, no, it's not possible, right? For Entra ID, you can give federation across many services. Federation. For example, now, how many of us have tried to log in? How many of us have tried to log in to some applications? They tell you, okay, log in with your GitHub, log in with your Facebook, log in with those things. Okay, with Entra ID, you can integrate login with other federation services, other third-party authentication services. It's like Google, it's like GitHub. You can configure those ones. But with Entra, with Active Directory Domain Services, you can't do that. Standard difference between the two, right? On the last one, when you talk about how things that differentiate them is with OU. So with Active Directory Domain Services, there is also hierarchy. So that means it follows this hierarchical structure. That means, okay, if I want to get to Dominic, for example, I have to open this door, I have to pass through here. So there is a level. So for example, now it's like you have a manager. Let's say, for example, if I use a company, for example, then you have your manager. You have a CIO, you have a CTO, you have the CEO, right? In Entra, everything is flat. So whenever you hear organizational units or use or hear group policies, policies, it doesn't exist in Entra ID. It exists in not Active Directory Domain Services. So it exists.
So in other words, what he's trying to say, simple analogy I just posted on the chat. The difference between Entra ID and ADDSS, that's Active Directory Domain Service. The Entra ID, like I said, is simply like a passport for online services, while your ADSS is your office ID card for local computers, like your physical computers. One is online, one is your physical computer that you can see. So just bear in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. All right. Moving further, we talk about Entra ID plans. What are these? Then Microsoft can say, it's true that we are giving Entra ID, but there are plans to it, right? There are levels to it. There are different ones depending on the one you subscribe to. If you are using the free version, they're saying that you get single sign-on unlimited, right? It comes with it unlimited. You still have cloud and federated authentication, but you don't have advanced group management. You don't have conditional access. You don't have risk-based conditional access. You don't have automated user and group provisioning to apps. You don't have PIM, privileged identity management. You don't have advanced identity governance. You don't have those features. But if you are using Microsoft IDP1, it's like a subscription. It's like a plan. So just like now, hey, you can afford not to have data. You cannot afford not to have you can afford not to have a call data or card to call. But that doesn't mean that you're not getting MTN service. Doesn't mean that someone cannot reach you. I can still text you, right? I can still call you and you pick your call. But if you want to be able to call you want to use some of our services like conditional access policy, then you need to move minimum of P1. If you want to advance, if you want to use more features, then you have to move to minimum of P2. All right, you have the minimum of P2. So these are basically levels to this, right? That's what it's all about. So whenever you hear Entra ID plans, think of it like, okay, what are the extra features I can get from Microsoft AD? For if I'm using P1, that means I can have the conditional access policy. You ask me what is conditional access policy? This is just policies. So for example, now I can decide, okay, I have my company in Nigeria, all my businesses are in Nigeria. I don't want people to log in from, if your IP address is saying China or is saying US, I want it to be blocked. You'll not be able to access my environment. It doesn't matter whether you have your username and password is correct. This is where I am protecting my environment. So for example, now I want to social media, but hey, Helen is my head of marketing. All her businesses in membership. Sometimes she travels to US, sometimes she travels to Europe. I can say, okay, hey, but the company doesn't have business in China. Can enable log in and say, I can enable conditional access policy and say, okay, if anybody that is traveling, you're authenticating from Nigeria, you could be able to authenticate. If you're authenticating from US, you should be able to authenticate. But if your IP address is saying things like Vietnam, China, I'm sorry, you should not be able to access. That means if you go to vacation on those periods, you won't be able to access the company resources. That's what conditional access is all about. So you basically say, hey, access my environment where you meet these certain conditions. I can go further and explain this further. Say, okay, what are things that conditional access policy say? For example, I say there's what we call impossible travel. Imagine now, I think John is in New Zealand, right? John, am I correct? John is in New Zealand. Imagine John is in New Zealand now. John signs into his environment now, connects to my laptop. Next minute, I'm seeing John trying to connect from Nigeria. It's not possible for John to be in New Zealand, and next 5 minutes, John is in Nigeria. That means because we call impossible travel. I can set up conditional access policy to block that based on behavior. So that is also possible. Also, if you are using P2, there's what we call privilege identity management. So I'm picking this, I'm explaining them, even though some of them are not covered in the 104, some of them are part of 85 grade, but these are the things I see on the day-to-day area of working. So there's what we call privilege identity management. What is PIM? You always say PIM. PIM is basically saying, hey, I want to give you access to my environment, but I don't want to give you access all the time. I want to give you access for a certain period. Think of it like this now. Let me use who am I using? I'm going to use Win, for example. Win is my head of IT. Win decides, okay, hey, I have Dominic. Dominic handles Microsoft AD for us. Does it make sense for me to give Dominic access 247? We only work 9 to 5, 8 to 5, or whatever, 9 to 5, right? So what if I make it such a way that Dominic can only have this access when he needs it? So he activates the access when he needs it, right? That is what privilege identity management is all about, PIM, right? The one I mentioned earlier about, say, okay, you cannot be in Nigeria and New Zealand in the space of 5 minutes. This is what risk-based conditional access. So you see that one, it's not available in, sorry, okay. Okay, so one uses it. I will explain that one. That's a very good question. Adela, I like the way you think. Risk-based conditional access. That means you're in this country, suddenly you're in another country. That is only available if you're using P2. So there's a question that Adiola asked, which I was expecting someone to ask me, because that's a possible way to bypass. He said, hey, so in cases where one uses a VPN to another country, does that mean no access as well for conditional access policy? No. That person will have access because it's being evaluated based on what IP address. So for example, now my IP address is showing correctly that I'm in Netherlands. If Netherlands IP is blocked, if I want to bypass that, I need to enable, and I might use a VPN. But there's a possibility. That's where the second option from the risk-based conditional access, sign your risk and user risk, is saying, hey, okay, Nonso tried to log in from Netherlands. In the last 5 minutes, he was blocked. The last 3 minutes was blocked. Suddenly, Nonso appears in Nigeria. Right? Is it possible for Nonso to be, even if Nonso is the Harry Potter of witches, there's no speed that you use to there's no speed that you will use to appear between Nigeria and Netherlands in space of 3 minutes. That means it's a user risk. He's going to block me or ask you to do extra verifications. But yes, once you change your IP address, it's possible that you change your IP address. So if you anticipate ahead of time and change the IP address to that region, yes, you can come in because it's evaluating with IP address. But remember, this is just one of the policies. There are several policies. Policies say, okay, only on the device I give you. So for example, my office now, if I try to sign in with my personal phone, it's not going to work because this device is not issued by my office, NIBC. It's a personal device, so I'm not allowed to access the environment with my own personal device, right? Is it making sense? Guys. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you for that. Let me just chip in. Let me chip in something for Diola. So the first thing is, the question you asked is, so in case where one uses a VPN for another country, does it mean no access or as well for that conditional access? Yes, great question. I mean, when you ask questions like that, like my colleague here said, it's question that also, so that depends on the conditional access policy. So first thing first, understand what is conditional access. Conditional access basically is the security feature inside Microsoft Entra ID. So that inside Microsoft ID that decides whether a user can access a particular resources or based on a certain condition. The condition can be either location by IP address or country, by device compliance. If your device is compliant, you can access it. If it's by if they set the conditional access, if this person wants to log into this computer, let it be to this particular IP. Anything outside this IP, don't sign that person in. That is that's the question you're asking. Another thing is user risk level. Another thing is risk signing risk. Then last one will be application being accessed. So those are the things that you should consider. Those are the factors. So it's in a scenario where if you use a VPN from another country, what will happen to it? If the policy blocks on unknown or risky location, then so be it. You won't have access. It will likely be denied, right? So if the condition doesn't apply to what you are trying to access, then fine, you can have access to it. So if the condition says anybody who does not have this IP 192.168.10.10, if you come with another IP .10.11, sorry for you. Your IP must have you must have this IP from .10.10 to be able to sign in. So why does it matter? The meaning of this is the question you ask is why is this matter? Why does it actually matter? Organizations use this to prevent unauthorized access from suspicious locations. VPN can look suspicious because they marks like your real location. Do you understand? So I don't know if maybe I'm able to understand and explain that clearly for you. Thank you. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, thank you very much. So moving further, the next thing I'm talking about is self-service password reset, right? So what is this? I'll just, in short, you hear it called SSPR, self-service password reset. It's basically this, right? The mother John will still remember. John, in UVA, I once worked with a team. What my team does is basically we reset. One of our jobs to do is to reset password. So if someone goes on leave, his account is disabled. When he comes back, his account, a person needs to come to my team, we'll reset the password. Just imagine a whole people doing that. So a lot of people doing this because of what UV has 16,000 staff. Then we need to reset users' password. So, but with this self-service password reset, say, hey, okay, if you forget your password, you don't have to go and meet an IT team. So for most of us, if we forget our Gmail password now, imagine every time you forget your Gmail password, you need to reach out, call Google on the phone, wait for Google will ask you some questions. If you meet those and they will now reset your password. Imagine that, right? With self-service password reset is a feature that Microsoft implemented that you can actually go and reset your password if you meet certain conditions. Certain conditions will be like, okay, hey, you already have your authentication app configured. So if you have your authentication app configured, of course, you can go ahead and reset your password because you trigger password reset. It will actually do some verification on your phone, maybe by a number or by a call or anything, or by some code. You fill in those code and you're successful, right? That's what password reset is all about. SSPR, in short, this guy's self-service reset. But for you to do it, remember, you need to have an account. You have an account for you to be doing that, just in a nutshell. All right. Moving further, the next thing is objective user accounts and group accounts. I thought a little bit about this, but I'm just going to just run through the slides and show you guys an example. I'm going to create sample accounts for everybody. Maybe they need to try to log in with those accounts, maybe 3 people, and see how it goes. Maybe at the end, John can also share his screen. If we have a few more minutes, maybe we can do that. But let me just give you what user accounts are. User accounts are basically saying, hey, you are users. For example, most of us, when we join a new company, they create an account for us that we want to use to access our email. That's what we use to access the company's laptop. That's what we use to access the company resources. That's what the user account is. The next thing is, okay, the account is an email, a group account. For example, now you join, let me say you join a compliance team, you have received a group email, you are being added to the compliance group. So what does that mean? That if I send an email, so if I want to send an email to the group, for example, your manager wants to send an email to everybody, instead of sending an email to one by one, you can just get the entire and just send it to there, right? Same way to send to, for example, we call it all staff. If your CEO wants to send email to everybody that is under him, basically sends an email to all staff as a group, for example. Things to note: if you delete a user in our Entra ID, it can go to delete users and recover that user. It basically stays there for 30 days. I'll show you guys an example of that. If same with groups, you can restore groups, you can restore users, right? How do you create a user? There are two ways. This one is very important. Please pay attention. So, okay, okay. Just before moving forward.
Yeah.
Uh,
You can continue.
Okay, so another thing, manage user accounts. So how do you create a user account and what are types of user accounts? Yeah, things, for example, let's say, for example, now there's what we call invited user. Invited user when I decide to invite a particular user to my environment, right? For example, now Dominic works for Dominic Enterprises, so works on also enterprises. Dominic is a security guy. I want him to come and run what they call the security checks on my environment. I don't want to create an account for Dominic. I can invite Dominic to my accounts, to my tenants. If I invite him for me to do it, and Dominic will be an invited user. So for example, now I can invite Win to my tenant. If I want to give Win access to create things on my environment now, to manage my identity, I can invite the person. I can invite Win to my environment with a Gmail or with an Outlook. I can invite them. That's an invited user. I can also create a user. So for example, now Helen joined my organization. Hey, Helen, welcome to Noso Corporations. I can create an account for Helen. Helen I can use for helen.ezadi@nosocorporations.com. I can create an account and create a username and password for Helen. All right. That's another example. Another example for how will you able to do that? Just things to note. For you to be able to create users, for you to be able to create administer a user in Azure, you need to have this permission. Remember, permissions are important. You need to be either a global administrator. A global administrator is the highest permission you will have in Entra ID. Please know that word, Entra ID. So if you have global administrator, that means you can do anything. You are like the Oga, you are like the president of the whole world in your tenants. You are like the president of your tenants, right? Another thing, if I want permission to just manage only the users or groups, I can use user administrator. So for example, now I'm the CEO of Noso Corporations. I decided, okay, I have a service desk team. Those service desk team are the ones that will be creating users, managing, deleting users, but basically managing the lifecycle of users. It doesn't make sense for me to give them the global administrator, which will be too much permission. Rather, I'll give them what? User administrator. So this also I'm tying some few things together on this. This is the principle of what? Least privilege. Least privilege in Azure, in security in general, basically saying, hey, if you need permission to WhatsApp on my phone, I'm only give you permission to WhatsApp. I won't give you permission to the whole phone. If you need permission to create a VM, I'm only give you permission to create a VM. I'm not going to give you permission to delete a VM. I'm going to give you permission to I'm not even give you permission to log into a VM. So I'll give you permission, least privilege. You only get permission for what you need to do. It's a security principle. It's also part of things in the interview. So for example, now, hey, I have users. Just the example I gave before, let me repeat it again. I have people that are in service desk. I shouldn't give them global administrator, even though that what global administrator can do, user administrators can do it. Or global administrators can do much more than what user administrator can do. So because their role is only to manage users, I'm going to give them what? User administrator. So please note, in conclusion, for you to be able to create a user, for you to manage a user, you need to you need to have what? Be a global administrator or a user administrator. All right. Deleted users can be restored by what? For 30 days. You can see the live sign-in and audit information available log. So if I create a user for Helena and John and they try to sign in, I'll be able to see their login and where they're coming from. I'll see the IP address they're coming from. I'll see the location they're coming from. It's all possible in Azure. Okay. Group accounts. Yeah, when you go group accounts, there are three types of groups. There are two types of groups mainly. There's security groups. There's M365 groups, right? These are the two types of groups you have. You have security groups, you have the M365 groups. What are the difference between the two? Security groups are basically, from security groups, if I can remember vividly, you basically you can use it to create, you can set up dynamic users. So just to tally, let me diversify a little bit and go to what membership types, because that's where you also explain it very well. Membership types basically saying, okay, what kind of a member? So if I create a group now, what kind of member? How would that, if I create a group now, group called non-source managers, how would managers be added to the group? Assign means manually, I have to manually assign those users. That means I have to manually pick my managers. My managers are Aboyaya, Vitalis, Detola, Adola, Leo. These guys are my John. These are my managers. I have to manually assign them. That means if John leaves my company tomorrow, John doesn't want to, John becomes a CTO tomorrow, I have to also manually go there and remove John. That's membership types. If it's a dynamic user is going to look at, hey, John's role is no more manager. John's role is no more CTO, because his role has changed. Automatically, you will remove John automatically. So that one is managed automatically, and it's actually a feature in Microsoft. Please note, just like every good thing, if for you to be able to do dynamic user and dynamic device, it's not free. You need to have a P1 or a P2 license. Dynamic membership types, for you to use these two features, you need to have a P1 or a P2 license. That's what Microsoft is saying. So for course, Microsoft basically teaches it around you, like, okay, we have all these external features, but of course, you can get to this place, you need to have social permission for you to get to these users, right? Assign licenses to users, and this is assign license. Okay, so for you to assign licenses, you can say Enter ID comes as a free service. I think I mentioned this before. You can get additional functionality with a P1 or a P2 license, just like I mentioned a few seconds ago, right? Additional service like O365, for example, you want to get email, is a paid service. So you want to get, and most of these are managed through the admin portal. I'm just going to leave that here. So I think we've come to the end of the slides. I just want to quickly show you guys how to create users. Something simple. And I also share the labs for some people that went ahead and got their subscription, so they can create this on their own. This one doesn't take money, it's quite free. So let me go ahead and create a user. I think I like John. So if I want to invite John's external email, John's Gmail, I can come and say invite external user, right? I can now put John's email. Let me see, for example, using my email, now I can use John's email and invite John's email to there. So I can say, hey, I say display name, let me see, no, so I'm just calling on so, but it's John, just John in the spirit, right? So I can go ahead and receive invites. If I review invite, it's going to send an invitation to Nonso to come and join my tenants, right? It's done now. If I refresh it now, let me see. Until Nonso accepts it, it will not be available, but let me see. Let me see. I'm show you guys what it looks like. I'm going to bring it up here. Few minutes now. Gmail. Yeah. So this is an example of what an invite looks like. You're saying, say, hey, please act only on email. If you cross the organization, say, hey, new train 60 invited you to access application within the organization. You can say, hey, you are allowed. No, so is invited to the organization. If I accept the invitation, it's going to go ahead and try to accept the invitation. That's still how it works. So it's mean saying, I trust this user, I'm going to accept the invitation, blah, 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 blah. Other ways to sign in. I don't want to use a passkey. Let me use this. Okay. This is an example of what inviting user. This is an example. If you want to invite the user, this is an example. For yeah, I see accept. Okay, say hey, if you are joining this, this person will be able to receive your profile data, collect and log your activity, use your profile data and sign in that and sign in activity. So if you accept it, that means you should be able to use all these things. So it's basically actually what am I permitting to user to do by agreeing to sign into there. So I'm going to sign in with this just to show you guys example. See, this is the apps. So currently doesn't have any apps. And oh, sorry, Peter. You say you missed the first class for time difference. So if you refresh now, I want you to show something now. See, the user principal name is what, so at Gmail, that like has external added to it. But see the user type is what is a guest. Because what I invited a guest user. Remember, invite external user, a guest user. So I'm a guest in this tenant. If I want to create a profile for John, I can come here and say, create a profile for John. I can say, hey, John, right? John, my friend, John, and say, okay, display name John. This is my domain. I'm going to do John, for example. I'm going to leave that John. The properties, where is John, what is my company name, what's the job title? I mentioned, so let's say John, we'll John a manager, right? I can create departments. Of course, I don't want to waste time. I can put address, I can put email, John's email, I can put John's location, I can go further and put things about usage location, right? Where is John? I think John is in New Zealand, right? New Zealand. I put John from New Zealand and review assignments. Which group do I want John to attend to join to? I can say, okay, John, I don't have any groups here for, oh, wow, this is really, I think, cleaning it up. I'm going to cancel this. Which role do I want John to? Remember, I mentioned, okay, user administrator, global administrator. If I give John global administrator now, John will have the same permission as me to manage everything here. But I want John to manage just the users. I can say, call John user administrator. So and just select this. This is permission I'm giving John. Role, this privilege. Remember, guys, review. This is a password. Like if I share this in the chat now, I believe John can log in here with this. I can say send. I'm sending the username and password to John. And why is it not copying? Sharing on the chat, and can go ahead and create. This user is not created, never. If I refresh now, John profile is here. See, John is a member because what John was created directly inside my tenants. So if John, you can try to log in here to ask you to change your password. I just want to show people the logs. In the meantime, I want to show you guys groups. Groups is also very simple. I can come here, create a group. Security group or M365 group. We need every type of group. Group name, I can call it what? AZ104 class. AZ104. I can just leave it like this. Add some description. You see, because I don't have P1 or P2, the only membership type available to me is what? Signed. Select dynamic assigned before this group. But because I don't have a P1 or P2, all right, I'm only have what dynamic open to me. Another thing I want to know, this group is asking me to select members. I can select the members. For example, I can go ahead and just select John. I want John to be a member, right? And add John. John is one member. Another thing I want to explain here is owners selected. Owners. What are owners? For example, now, all of us are part of Dominic's company called AZ104, all have team members. So imagine we don't have money for P1, but we want a solution whereby Helen knows our team members now. So Helen should be able to add people to our team. So instead of I want Helen to be able to add people to our team, I can make Helen owner. So Helen is the owner of this group. Simple as that. Helen is the owner of this group. So Helen will be able to manage this group. That's just how to put it. So in this group now, I can come and make Helen owner. In this group, John is the owner. I'm making John owner. I mean, John can add users. John can remove users from this group. Just created the group now. So this is an example of what an M365, and a security group. So if I go to groups now, you can see total number of security group 1, cloud groups 1. I can come here and see all groups, and I can see the AZ104 group. All right. Sorry guys, any questions? Any questions? All right. I don't know if anybody has a subscription, because we actually come to the end of the class for today. But if anybody has some questions, or if anybody has what do you call it? If anybody has an Azure environment subscription, maybe that person can share a screen and that person can try this on their own. So it will not be just, hey, so it's just click. That person can actually do it, and we can walk the person through. I think we have like 25 minutes for questions, or we can call it short today, depending on anybody, depending on people. So, to you guys, any questions? Anything you want to clarify? Anything that looks like a mystery to you?
Again, I'm just waiting for you to finish the session, your slide, and then I have a strong information I need to pass across the entire team here so that they will be able to see and get acquainted with it. It's a Microsoft notification across board regarding someone cloning Microsoft authentication page. So you have to be also careful. You see when you add users, you see the Microsoft authentication page. Someone can equally clone that page and then use it to give to marks as your colleague in your organization, and they use that to gain access to different companies. So you also have to be careful in terms of clicking any emails that comes into your email box in our organization.
Exactly.
Because after this session, I'm going to share my screen and then show you Microsoft updates that they shared across globally across the security breach. They hacked into 95 countries in total, and they tracked them for. There's a Nigerian company, Raccoon 365, where they had to clone Microsoft page and then marks it as go to different organizations from different regions. They clone those pages, steal people's identity, and then sell it to different hackers to be able to gain access to different organizations and then steal their different bank information. A lot of monetary, over close to $100,000 so for 94 countries. So I will share the information just when you're done with it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm actually done with the class. Philip said, do you have one-on-one mentorship session? Philip, just to answer your question, we might do one-on-one mentorship session, but right now, because we all have a 9 to 5, right? 9 to 5 that basically runs Monday to Friday. So right now, what we offer is basically mentorship in the sense that if you go through this class, all the previous classes are recorded in videos and on YouTube. Dominic will also share it again. If you go through any video and you don't understand anything, we always say you can type a message, type your questions in the chat. In this chat or in the WhatsApp group, we have a WhatsApp group. I'm going to share the link again. In that WhatsApp group, if you don't understand, if you type it and if you type it, I believe you, I promise you, before the day runs out, for the end of the day, I will respond, or Dominic will respond, or our MVP, which is traveling across country right now, will also respond. That is CJ, will respond. So that's what I can believe you. But if you want maybe extra one-on-one hands-on, I have to tell you, just from my own personality side, I'm not available right now. Maybe by the end of this class, when this class ends and we're no more running any more sessions, maybe we may have a 1 month or 2 months free before we run a new session, then we can go ahead and do that. But in the meantime, you can get one-on-one access to your questions, to basically to anything you don't understand freely that we've taught in the class, and we explain. Just know you have all day to do that. That's just it. Please go ahead, Dominic.
Okay, so there's a company called and some of you must have heard it. It's called Raccoon 0365. So it's a group that made over $100,000 by creating fake Microsoft 365 login page. And after creating this page, they start renting them to different scammers. And then these scammers use this fake page to steal people's password since July 2014. I'm sorry, 2024. And there's this group that helped different fraudsters in 94 countries. I repeat, 94 countries to create fake Microsoft emails and websites that treat thousands of victims. More than 5,000 login credentials were stolen. And then in between, they carry out business emails, compromise scams. Eventually, what happened was on September 16, 2025, Microsoft recently announced that the takedown of 338 websites used by this Raccoon 0365. And this group, when they Microsoft take down this 338 website owned by Raccoon O365 group. They didn't stop there. Now Microsoft is taking a legal action at the same time to arrest the mastermind of this group. Meanwhile, some of this group are from Nigeria and other parts of India, China, and other parts. So they are selling to different people across the world. This is a wake-up call. If you run a business and you work for an organization, if you use a Microsoft 365 or you just log into your email and you are potentially a target, please take notes. Nigeria startup, especially those handling HR, finances, and they are becoming a prime phishing target right now. So Raccoon 365 may be gone, but the question is, there are still other scammer phishing sites like Raccoon 365. So please bear in mind and take note that things like this, do not click any, even you work for an organization, somebody recently sent you create a user, you just recently employed to an organization, and then someone recently sent you, add you as a user, and then create an email, add you to that user, and then they sent a notification to you that you should accept that user. You should accept to join that group, like so shared. Be very careful. Always ensure you check the emails correctly, because sometimes they can use Microsoft with a 0 instead of an O, a number 0 instead of an O. So please be vigilant when clicking emails, accepting requests, and then when you do, you think maybe you've done all of that, but in the real sense, you just give access the hacker or the scammer or the people who are trying to fish into your organization access to your organization. So also, this is a wake-up call, because what he just did here on the session is to tell you that people use these things to come into different to disguise as your colleague in the office and then gain access to the organization and then steal people's data. So this is like a wake-up call, like an awareness talk. So please bear in mind that things like this, you should be vigilant in terms of accepting requests from a Microsoft page, just to let you know. Thank you.
Okay, so there are some questions I want to get to. Say, please, the WhatsApp group, I'll paste the link now. Someone said, Helen also said, can you send a picture of it to the WhatsApp group, please? Sorry, Helen, it's a picture of what? Can you type it out? Sorry. What am I missing?
Ali, you can speak up if you can.
If you can, maybe.
Oh, okay. Raccoon 365. Okay, let me share. I will share the Microsoft page for you, and then I'll share it on the chat here. It's on Microsoft. What's it called? Yes. So you find it here.
And Philip, I've also shared the link on the WhatsApp group, so you can also see it there.
Okay. Yeah. So this is the blog spot from Microsoft. I just shared it. Raccoon 365. If you click on that link, you will see how they disguise clone the Microsoft page for an organization. It looks like exactly Microsoft login page. And when you do that, you try to sign in, you notice that you are entering into a Microsoft page, not knowing that some of this page, the Microsoft is spelled Microsoft with a number 0 instead of a letter O. So be very vigilant when you see things like this. I mean, they can clone him, they can clone your name. Let's say your website is nonso.jechukwu at cook at 104.com. That nonso that they are spelling, instead of using O, they can use 0. So be very vigilant when you're accepting emails and also clicking link for an organization. This is like a wake-up call. Microsoft is also telling every engineers to put an awareness out there to every users who use Microsoft products, so that you don't get access, you don't get compromised or hacked or get unauthorized access to an organization and stuff like this. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Okay, someone asked a question. John said, hey, I'm not able to log in after creating a free account. What could be the reason? I was ready to do a 2-factor authentication when I got stuck. So John, yes, when setting up a new account, you're expected to enable your 2FA. So what you can do, if you can share your screen so we can walk you through this, if that's okay by you.
Yeah.
You can share a screen, we can walk you through this. If not, then I can just explain. I don't want to explain with mouth. I actually want to just show you. I think that's the best way to learn. Okay, is it possible for you to share your screen? So just to put it, you need to have your authenticator. You need to have your authenticator app, right? Then you need to scan some QR code. That's what you need.
I think it would be better if you share your screen and let's walk it through and then see how best we can. Yeah.
Asking for private security and privacy permission.
Is it possible I can see? Can you paste a screenshot just to, because it's difficult to actually troubleshoot if you can't see what's happening.
I think there's a security and privacy issue here. I'm trying to.
Can you snap and post on WhatsApp? Just to see if you can screenshot it or snap it with your phone and post it on WhatsApp for just for us to see. Okay, depending when John is trying to log in. Anybody has any issue? Any other issue? Anything else? How many people are able to log in? Anybody have any issues? So I'll just say it again. Please just try and get an Azure account, right? Get the free trial. Because for you to really understand this, it's free. It's not going to cost you anything. You really need to be able to do hands-on. And AZ104 is basically how to configure. That's why if you look at the requirements, you say how to configure this. So it will make sense if you can have your own Azure account. So you'll be able to practice in practice. Okay, someone said, what's the difference between AWS and Azure? Philip. So the difference between AWS and Apple is just basically they're all both public cloud platforms, right? The major difference is that AWS is owned by Amazon and Azure is owned by Microsoft. That's just, but they're all both public cloud platforms. The training we are doing is on AZ104, which is basically Azure Administrator.
So we can stop the recording now if we're done.
Yeah, I think we can stop the recording now. If anyone has any more questions, you can reach out through the Teams chat or send a message on the WhatsApp group on